The wine industry right now is unusually open, I feel like, because before the processed wine situation, the wine industry has always been saddled with this sort of like constraint of regional typicity expectation that has always made it hard for someone to do something different in a region.
Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew, and if this is your first time tuning in, this show is all about things that people in the hospitality world would be interested in. So that's servers, bartenders, cooks, chefs, all the way. And one of those topics is wine. And that is why we are talking to today's guest, Steve Matthiasson. Steve is one of the original big names in Napa, Sonoma, California, really. He's consulted on hundreds of wineries. He helped write the sustainability rules for Lodi and so much more. So without any further ado, here's Steve Matthiasson, and thank you for listening to Serves You Right. Thanks for joining us today on Serves You Right. So
glad to be here.
Yeah, well, we had some technical difficulties, internet problems, but we made it through. We always do. So I'm super excited to talk to you today. I know a lot of our listeners work in restaurants. They're big into, the alcohol side of things. You are well known in the world of wine. And so I was looking it up, and, we got Spottswoode, we've got Chappellet, Stag's Leap. The list of the places that you've worked or, helped in one way or another, almost be faster to list the wineries that you haven't helped. Like, how did you get into the world, and what's your background?
Okay. Yeah, I've worked for a lot of wineries over the years because I started working for a vineyard consulting company 31 years ago. So it's been a long time, and learned a ton along the way. But so what I got into it because I basically wanted to be an organic farmer. That was my dream from when I was a kid. Well, when I was a kid, I didn't know about the term organic, but I was an environmentalist as a kid because, went to a hippie school, and so, or we had garden stuff. So, as a grade schooler, it was like we were gardening with compost and stuff, and that was back in the 70s. So I wanted to be an organic farmer, but it's tough to do if you don't have any land, you don't have any money, and my cousins were farmers. That was the closest thing, and so I managed to figure out, because I went to UC Davis for grad school to study organic farming, and the minute I got there, I realized I need some practical experience. This is all theoretical, and I got a job working for a vineyard consulting company, and that brought everything together for me because I wasn't planning on working in vineyards, but I was super into food and wine, and fermentation, pickles, beer, anything I could ferment, and so we were like hipsters back in the early 90s, kind of.
I know, it was like full on hippie
stuff.
Before hippies were big, right?
Yeah. Portlandia was about us basically at that, so picture, early on fermenters, and so working in vineyards, I was like, this is great, perfect. Everything's come together, and I just, dove in and have been working in that world now for, like I said, 31 years with vineyard consulting. Our home winemaking switched to starting our own winery in 2003. And that initially was 5 barrels of wine, side project, and just have fun and just see if we can start a little business. But our wine was always based on our values of local, sustainable, seasonal produce, basically. And so we didn't come at it as a traditional winery that is obsessed with a wine region or a variety or a style per se. We came at it as like a small organic vegetable grower that would grow a ton of different heirloom tomatoes or heirloom apples, and really celebrate the craft of horticulture and the tradition and the healthy soil, and let's see what beautiful produce happens. That's kind of how we approached it. So rough decade or so in there, as during the aughts when that wasn't really very fashionable in the wine world. It was more about getting a big score and having a big name, but we pushed through, and every year making a little bit more wine and doubling down, and always keeping my day job so that we didn't have to pay ourselves or make compromises or take on debt or a bunch of partners or anything. And so we were able to kind of do things our own way, and always learning from all of my different clients, because you learn what to do and what not to do from different people, and it's the craft, it's the I had such a good time listening to your interview with the brewmaster with Sierra Nevada, because he's like such a lifelong learner and fanatical craftsperson for all facets of his craft with that brewery, from hospitality to production and everything in between. And that's kind of how we approach it. It's like, one of the things I'm proud about is our wines are consistent, and you can always tell it's a Matthiason wine. That's from all these years of studying how to grow grapes, how to ferment grapes, how to age wine, how to get it in the bottle, and how to tell stories about it. And so it's been a process now, but now our wines are known, and it's a good time for us.
Well, yeah, you've done a great job, and you've kind of become a flashpoint in the discussion about, what is happening in Napa, what's happening in the world, and are we happy with the way that wines are progressing? Mm-hmm. Been really, really cool to know your wines for most of my career. I do wonder if you had started, can you imagine if you had started your career right now, would things have gone differently? Because it seems like you came around when things were definitely going into a more industrial, higher ABV, more controlled, you just processed wine. And it gave you something to kind of stand against. Does that make sense?
Right. Mm-hmm. I think that for coming now, I think this is the most exciting time in wine that I've seen in my career, for new wineries getting started, young winemakers that are really passionate and idealistic. I hope that the majority of them are successful. The market is so, horrible right now, and challenging and just brutal, but for so many different reasons. But so it's going to be difficult. It's difficult for anyone right now to get a wine brand going. But the energy and the zeitgeist of young winemakers right now is super exciting to me. Like, I went to a wine bar recently nearby in Vallejo, and it's a lower income relative to Napa, so the wine bar really reflected that. They had a lot of reasonably priced wines, and I hadn't heard of a single one of them. I was talking to that person in the wine bar, and they're all like, this is like their third vintage, this is their second vintage, this is their first vintage.
That's cool.
And it was really cool varieties, and I thought the wines were well made. They were definitely natural influenced process wise, but with good craftsmanship and beautiful wines. I was totally psyched, because I was like, God, what a great time where I can go to this wine bar, and I'm in the thick of it right here, in the middle of the industry, and there are like 12 wines on there, and I hadn't heard of a single one, so it's just
for someone who's steeped in the industry too.
Yeah, so and they're not all going to make it, but some of them are, and so just to answer your question, what it would be like to start now, the wine industry right now is unusually open, I feel like, because before the processed wine situation, the wine industry has always been saddled with this sort of like constraint of regional typicity expectation that has always made it hard for someone to do something different in a region. And in Europe, so many people are going down to France because they want to do something different than what their region's known for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, legally it's difficult over there.
Yeah, but the legal stuff reflects industry-wide sort of baked in, this is how wine is supposed to be from a certain place. And that's not if you know anything about growing grapes and just growing plants and cooking or fermenting shit, it's never has to be one way. So, but the wine world is unusually open right now worldwide to new stuff, and so so that's why it's such an exciting time right now.
Yeah, maybe you would have been even more well known and more of the leader of a huge band of people experimenting. Who knows? Yeah, interesting. I did want to kind of go back and double click on something you said, because it made me curious. You described the wines at that wine bar as natural, and I noticed that when you described your wines, you described them as more organic, local. Do you ever use the term natural with you? Do you distance yourself from that word? Because I know it comes with some baggage too, and a lot of different expectations.
Yeah, I don't tend to use that word with our wines, where I feel that we drink a lot of natural wines in our house. We drink a lot of what I would consider naturally made but classically styled wines in our house, more so probably. So those wines in that bar, that's what I feel like the natural, it's a very loaded term, and I think there's good and bad that comes with it. I appreciate the disruption. As an old punk rocker, I appreciate breaking stuff down. I appreciate
redhead Alice firing, coming in and knocking down some people.
Knocking some people down as a, because some of the natural wines are the wine equivalent of a band recording on their first take, and you can hear them talking in the background, and so the thing is, they're not all good, because it's not that easy it doesn't always sound good when you capture it on the first take, like Minor Threat was like with their song where they're like, play it faster, and then you hear them say that, and then they play the song. But the thing is that Minor Threat could really play, and so I don't try to paint with a big brush, right? There's some phenomenal natural wines, and there's some terrible natural wines, and there's some phenomenal classic wines, and there's some terrible classic wines, and there's some, it's always going to be a mix. But sure. I think it's been, the breaking down of conventions and reshuffling has probably been more good than bad for our industry. There's been some bad, because we've lost, I think, some temporarily a little bit of the beauty that highly crafted wines can offer, but I think that's part of the evolution, and I think it's coming back around now.
All right, sorry to interrupt. We will come right back to the podcast, but I wanted to take a second and ask, if you have not had a chance to follow the show, please do. It means the world to me, and it does make me very happy. All right, back to the show.
I mean, convention is convention for a reason sometimes. I'm thinking about your wines. I would describe your wines as very distinctive, very well made, very refined, but I don't think I would ever describe your wines as unconventional. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's because you're iconic enough and I'm used to your wines, because they do definitely stand apart from kind of the big percentage, alcohol blockbusters that you do see. But I wouldn't, I would describe your wines as delicious, just conventionally delicious, like well made, I guess is another way of putting it.
Yeah, that's why I resonated to the Sierra Nevada, because those beers are so unbelievably consistent. And I really pride myself that our wines are consistent, but they have a point of view. We don't use any additives. The only thing our wines see is a small amount of SO2. It's just the craft of grape growing and winemaking, and trying to execute it well without with a very minimal intervention philosophy. And so, but they're atypical of our region, from stylistically, but I feel like they're very typical of our region from a terroir standpoint. The goal with our wines is that they taste like where they're from. I just have a different view on where they're from than a lot of my colleagues. And so, I really love wines that have a floating quality. They're not heavy. The motto is weight without heaviness, and really looking for transparency, clarity. Mm-hmm. So more of that kind of sense you get with Burgundy, that you see you're trying to get. Deliciousness is the first step, and it should always be there. But then you can pass through that into this sense of that transparent sense, where you're then feeling a little transported to that place. And some of the that you get when you're viewing nature is that hopefully you get that sense through the deliciousness, and that's my goal with the wines. And that's a different goal than like maximum hedonic expression or perfect texture, any
of the other,
all of the other stuff,
right to the max. Yeah, for sure. Because once you're pushing up to like 30 bricks, like crazy numbers, they all just start kind of tasting like light ports. You lose a little bit of that. But it's interesting.
The winemakers that make those wines tend to be very close to them, and they see very stark differences from wine to wine. But when you're further away, those differences aren't as obvious.
Well, we all love our children, right? Yeah, they're all special. When you make such kind of like small, local, true to the place wines, I'm wondering, how many different SKUs do you have? What is the range like? Because it's got to kind of start adding up.
20, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's super confusing for people that like Matthiason Wines. Well, but, like I said, hopefully you've noticed, it sounds like they all kind of taste like our wines, but then they all taste different at the same time. Because they all have acidity and a lightness and a clarity, but then hopefully the variety really comes through. Schioppettino tastes like Schioppettino. Cabernet Franc tastes like Cabernet Franc. So it's kind of like a hierarchy, right? It's balanced, great acidity, moderate alcohol. It's varietal. It tastes of the place, and so those are sort of all need to be there, and they can be, because they're all from living grapes from a place, and so there's no reason it shouldn't taste like the place.
And I'm thinking, presumably, you could make your life easier. So having all those different options also is part of the statement too, because you could just be the typical cab, chard, red blend, white blend, and call it a day, and just sort of have like maybe one strange blend from these XYZ grapes. Like, because I've got to imagine that keeping all that separate, fermenting it separate, and keeping track of it is its own headache. Like, it just has to be.
We can have like, because we harvest vineyards multiple times to get, we harvest vine by vine, and we only pick ripe vines. So in a given vineyard, we might have 5 different passes of harvest. So we could end up with 150 different lots of wine at the end of harvest. It's, separate fermentation lots between varieties and picks and everything. And so that's what I'm talking about the craft, because we have to track all that. Every single lot is different. There's no recipe formula. You're just paying attention to each of them. We got to make sure we taste through all of them. We have a little lab. We check on everything all the time, and we just, and this one we rack, this one we don't rack. This one it's time for its first SO2. This one is not time for its first SO2. This one will maybe give a little stir. This one we move to a warmer location. This is going to go in a bigger barrel, smaller barrel. And so we have this crazy complexity that we track it all, and then we start combining everything back together, towards bottling. Bottle 5-6 times a year, because different, part of élevage, the wine might be ready to bottle in January, and it's going to get tired if we wait until June to bottle it. Conversely, we were scheduled to bottle in January, but it's still too tight, and so we will push it back and bottle it later and give it a chance to open up some more. So that's all the craftsmanship. It's something, again, it's like we love it. That's the fun part. That's the joy of, like, we're trying to make great wines, and then in the market, you end up with all these wines, and it's like, it makes it challenging because people are like, what?
It's named after this valley. There's a Tondu.
Yeah, totally. But but they always know what they're going to get with one of our wines, and so it kind of works out. But if you go to the farmer's market and someone's selling heirloom tomatoes and they only have one tomato, you're like, what's up with this? I thought, I'm at the farmer's market. They have 5 or 10 different heirloom tomatoes with little names. This is Marble Stripe, this is Amish Pace, this is Mortgage Lifter, this is Brandywine. And sometimes they could sample them, and that's our philosophy, where we love all the varieties. I don't like the term noble variety. That's ridiculous.
Well, again, the parent loves all of his children. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. How did you get involved in such a wide range of varieties in a place that's only known for a couple? Is it just you found some that really spoke to you? Was it just pure luck? You got a vineyard and it was like, the stars aligned?
Luck. It was, when the first wine we ever made, 1995, we made Muscat of Hamburg, right? In the second year, I did 4 lots. I did Sazao, Alvaralheo, I'm not pronouncing it right, Tintacao, and I forget the 4th one. And so that was in 1996. And so it's always been, what are these different varieties and what's suited to our place? There's a whole world of varieties out there, obviously. Fast forward to working in Napa with our own company, and it's the big 7, right? Basically, you have the big 7. You have Cab, Merlot, Zin, Pinot Noir, Cab Franc, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. And so I was kind of bummed about that, but it was what it was. And then one of my clients, George Fair, for his retirement project, he was a heavy hitter in the wine industry at the business level. He ran the Henry Wine Group. He ran Geyser Peak back in the 70s. He started Gloria Ferrer, a bunch of stuff like that. Flipped Behringer. So most of those guys, as we know, we work in this space, hate wine, basically. It's like widgets. Don't fall in love with your product.
It's an arbitrage play. It's not a love play.
Yeah, George loved wine, and he was a mentor. He was my client, but he became a mentor for me, and he was always telling me that people could sell so much more wine if they love it. And so for his, because wine is unique that way, and for his retirement project, he decided to grow Ribolla Gialla. Because he traveled to Italy all the time. He was friends with the winemakers in Friuli. He'd been introduced to them. He had, for a while, had hired John Consgard when he started Muna, and he'd met all these through John Consgard. He met Grosvenor, and Radicon. And
the big names.
so he was like, I'm going to grow Ribolla for my retirement. And I was his vineyard manager. And so, okay. And so it was like so exciting. Like, we're finally going to do something. Like, I'd never even heard of Ribolla. I'd never heard of the region of Friuli at that point in time. And so that opened up a whole portal where we realized that we can have our cake and eat it too. When we start with our wine business, we can grow and sell stuff that we want to do. We don't have to pigeonhole and do the expected thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame. Like, the new world, the whole idea, the thing that's exciting about it is there are no rules. It's new, we're creating it. And it's like you're at work and your boss has declared that it's like casual Friday and everyone still showed up in a suit. It's like, like they gave us a little freedom here and we all just kind of did the same thing everyone else was doing. And I get it. Like, when there was no name, they tried to emulate and it worked. But you got to think there's more out there. There's more you could do.
And so, like, that podcast you had I was just listening last night to the one you did. I'm blanking on her name, but her company is Spark Consulting. It was Profit Comes First.
Yes. Kate, I believe. Yeah. Yeah,
it was such a good podcast from a standpoint of her insights on business. But there was a really good podcast. There's a lot to learn from her. But the statement about, like, you mentioned doing hot dogs and sushi, and maybe that's a bad idea to start a restaurant, make something that people want. And on that one, the answer is sure, you probably don't want to do a hot dog and sushi restaurant unless you're super passionate about hot dog and sushi and you see the logic. And no one, look at Momofuku, right? Like, no one, like if you have, you have to stick the landing, but if you have a vision.
So I would say to this, for like Ribolla Gialla, or however you do pronounce it, there are parts of the world where it's done and done well. And like similarly, yes, maybe sushi and hot dogs are a bad idea. There was a time when sushi was kind of an odd idea, but there was another part of the world where sushi did resonate. So it was like, okay, this doesn't exist in America. I think Americans might even think this is strange, eating raw fish. But there is a group of people somewhere that enjoy this. The concept makes sense. Maybe we should try this here. So, yeah, I think you should, and again, no one's ever going to do a sushi hot dog restaurant because that's just wildness, crazy. But I think if you have
about it, then do it. That's my point. And then it might be a freaking cult favorite, and you get a James Beard Award.
Well, that idea.
Chipotle doesn't have a James Beard Award. You know what I mean? That makes a lot of money.
Yeah. So that idea, as ridiculous as that example is, I did live with a Hawaiian for a while. Her name was Liahi, and a strange Hawaiian delicacy is Spam sushi, and I always thought it was strange. But hey, so
delicious,
it was the strangest thing I could reach for. So maybe I am wrong.
Yeah,
we'll have to go back and replay that episode. I do wonder, because you talked about your graduate degree, but I wondered if we could talk about your BA, because I think it was in philosophy, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did that come about? Was that just, you as a young man chose what you were passionate about, or was there a plan? Or
no, there was no plan. It was, I had to go to college. That was a rule in the family. And so I got to college, and I was not, I got to college and took a philosophy class, and the professor took me out to lunch and said, "You're really good at this. You should consider majoring in it." And there was no career I wanted to do, because I was like, well, what I really want to do is be a farmer, and I like growing, having a garden, cooking, and brewing beer. And so I guess I'll major in philosophy because this professor said that I was good at it. And so it was a super interesting major, and it's informed me as the training you get on trying to step back and think and question the assumptions was, I think, has been a great life skill, and has helped me a lot with. But I also studied sociology. I would have had a major in sociology as well, but I didn't bother doing a couple of the core courses because I already had a major. But I found that equally interesting, and that's also really helped me with all my work in sustainable agriculture, like years of, because, like I mentioned, my job is being a consultant. The other piece of that for years has been trying to change our industry and towards sustainability. I could teach classes at Davis on it. I go give talks on it. I do talks to grower groups. I talk to people one-on-one. I work behind the scenes to try to introduce people, put stuff together, connect a researcher to a grower, or connect two growers, or like someone sells beneficial insects, and I connect them to someone that could buy them or could sell them for them. And so all that is like sociology of like how do human systems work, and how do
I fit into the system?
Yeah, and it's really been helpful to navigate the wine world as well, and try to understand how the wine world works. And so all the it's like we have all these skills that we just piece together. It's the cool thing about continuing to learn.
I like that angle on the philosophy. It gives you the skill set to see the assumptions you're making about the system you're in that you maybe don't even realize. And I was curious because I went to St. John's for my college, and is very
so
you know from the Scholium Project probably, but
I know a bunch of people went to St. John's. There's the little Napa Nexus,
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Alex Consgard went to St. John's, and Rory Williams from Frog's Leap went to St. John's, and his wife Molly, they loved it. We spend a lot of money and read a lot of books, and then got to go get real jobs, farming and working in restaurants. But I, don't want to derail us there. I did want to say, one of the coolest things I did in my Somm journeys in the last couple of years, I went on a great trip to Lodi, and just kind of speaking to your connections and the push you've given towards sustainability, you're still spoken about with hushed tones about, all their sustainability measures and how much you did help spearhead that in the beginning. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that. Awesome. Well, there's such a cool group down there. Salt of the earth farmers trying to
some of the best pizza I've ever had, hands down. Yeah.
So I was working down in Modesto, Merced for 4 Seasons Ag Consulting, and Cliff Omar. So there's this little group of agricultural professionals in California that are independent pest control advisors. Okay. Pest control advisor is a license, and it's a profession where most farmers, pretty much all farmers, have a pest control advisor who helps them with all of their spraying of bugs and diseases and fertilizers, basically. And the independents are, a lot of times you get that service for free from the chemical companies. That's the more common thing. And so there's a bunch of little group of independents. So the company I was working for, the independents. So the grower pays because they want, our angle was more sustainability or help you go organic. And so Cliff Omar was the guy at the Lodi Wine Grape Commission. He was one of that old school pest control advisor, worked for a company called Scientific Methods before he got the job working to run their sustainability program in Lodi. So tons of experience, field experience. He has a PhD in entomology, and so pretty amazing guy. So he had this vision. He went to Australia to research, to network with some conference for sustainable agriculture, and they had this book. It was a self-assessment book, because the whole thing is voluntary stuff with farmers. No farmer wants someone to tell them what to do. It's kind of counter to the idea of being a farmer. But farmers for the most part, they want to do better. And so the idea is if you can have these voluntary programs where they can do better. And so the idea on this was, because everyone thinks they're sustainable, right? It's like, our kids are above average, our vineyard's sustainable, our wine
Alice
is balanced.
Firing describes it as, it's kind of like being a little pregnant. Everyone says it. It's like, where are you in the spectrum?
Yeah, exactly. So everyone's sustainable, everyone's wines are balanced, and so exactly. And so the idea is, well, if you go through this, this Australian book for different crops, it was like for wheat or corn or something. But the model was you have to go through this book and all these questions and rate yourself on all these very specific issues, like I irrigate overhead versus flood versus furrow versus drip. And then it's a 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then drip is more water conserving than furrow, which is more water conserving than overhead, which is more water conserving than flood, let's say. This is a simple example. So now you rate yourself, I get a number 4. And then that's under the water category. There's a pest management category, habitat category. And so then a grower goes through there and goes, shit, I suck at water management. And then there's information in there how you come up with an action plan, and you can kind of start working on it, because you can see exactly a map of exactly the areas that you could improve on. So Cliff was like, that's what we're going to do in Lodi for grapes. But we need someone who can write this book. And I was working as a pest control advisor with Four Seasons Ag Consulting, and that was part of that little scene of independent pest control advisors statewide. So somehow through the network, Cliff figured out about me and basically asked me to come in, and I ended up joining the Wine Grape Commission, and we got a grant and spent a whole year writing this book, the Lodi Wine Growers Workbook. And plus we did a lot of like seminars and get speakers in and stuff for education for all the growers on all the different stuff for sustainability or wine quality. Then the whole nother year, the kitchen table tour, we went to because there's like 600 grower members of the Lodi Wine Grape Commission, but about 200, this is where sociology comes in, about 200 of them show up for anything. The other 400 you never see. You have no idea who they are. And there's like maybe 20 that are super yeah, and there's like maybe 20 that are really involved, and they sit on the steering committees and the board and stuff. And they're the ones you see all the time, but they're really progressive growers. And so how do we get to all 600? So we got introductions to the 200 through the 20 that show up all the time. And then of those 200, then we basically would say, hey, would you host us for a morning, go through the book, and can you get 2 or 3 of your neighbors and to show up and do it with us? And we managed to get several hundred growers through that book in that first year. And it was talk about an education, showing up and sitting in someone's shop or their kitchen table and spending all morning as these farmers rate themselves on all these issues that we wrote. It was unbelievable. And I think we had a huge impact. And so that was what that was. And so then when I left to go do research briefly for a winery and then start our own consulting company here in Napa, another guy replaced me, Chris Storm, and they took it the next level to the Lodi rules and got their certification program, which kind of grew out of that. And it's a unique certification program because it was very data based. And so basically the idea was to give growers optionality where you're like, well, I really want to use this chemical, but let's say that strikes against me 20 points, let's say, so I got to make it up over here. And so if I water less and I don't put these fertilizers on, then I can use this. And so that way they could give them again, it's a voluntary program. So the flexibility built in there, but it'll let people move forward. So it was it's a pretty cool system, actually. It's kind of unique in that way. It's a measurable, science-based progression towards sustainability, but giving growers flexibility.
Nice, yeah.
Excuse me.
I love that. No, because it's something funny that I didn't even think about, but of course it has to be voluntary. Like, no one's going to let you come in unless there's a law behind it and tell them water less, don't spray, don't do this. You only really get away with that in Europe, and even then people try to skirt around the rules. I like the idea of continuing progression of improvement too, because I feel like sustainable has to first and foremost, mean sustainable for the farmer, i.e. like if they can't end up bringing some sort of crop to the market, they won't make money and they will go out of business. Like, they are the central thing, and the easiest thing for them to do is the same thing they've always done. But I like that there's also that little kernel of hope in humanity that most people do want to do better if they can. It's not always clear what to do better. And so having kind of a roadmap in different things and knowing that in 1 year, if you have to spray some fungicide because you have a huge outbreak, you're not going to instantly lose certification for all or nothing thing. Like, I like the flexibility of it and the recognition of human nature. Both, right. Yeah.
And we're not looking for a purity test. We're trying to, the idea is, how do we move forward? How do we continue to evolve and improve? And agriculture has such an impact on this planet, and if you can make a 1% improvement each year or a 3% improvement, then we're moving in the right direction. And we can get farmers to want to do it, not feel like they're getting forced into it, but they feel the passion, and it's great. I mean, that's it's all you can ask for. We're Matthiason, we're certified organic. That's a little okay. Our certification to organic is our it's almost like our religion or something like that. Like, there's probably better ways to move forward or different ways. We love being organic. It means something to me, that word, and idea of it, and there's a ethic and philosophy there that I like. As a cold hard businessman, maybe we would go about it a different way, but we're a family business, so we can choose voluntarily to be certified organic. So so everyone has their trip, right? But we want people to be moving forward and having progressively less and less impact on the planet and on the people as well, because another thing is human resources, which was a part of our original book, and it was beefed up with Lodi rules. Part of regenerative, now the term regenerative organic is out there, and it has carbon footprint, and we didn't have carbon footprint in there back in the 90s when we did that workbook, because it wasn't really part of the conversation the way it is now. We were just sort of ignorant to a lot of it, to be perfectly honest. And so now it's in there, and so it's also evolving. That's why we never say we're sustainable. But you won't hear at Matthiason us say we are sustainable. We're organic, but we're working towards sustainability. We're still using diesel in our tractors. We have electric tractors, but they're brand new. They don't work very well. They help. We're still figuring them out. We're trying. We're making efforts in that way, real concrete efforts, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, and I mean, and in that, what I said earlier too, like you kind of have to evolve that way, because if you don't do it carefully, if you lose the business, all of it's for naught anyways. Like you have to keep the business going, like as you work towards that idea.
And that's the balance, because you don't want that to be an excuse.
Oh, sure.
Well, we can't afford it, or I got, the economics is the most important part of sustainability, or next year, there's some sacrifice to your business is required. We don't want to be corporate greed.
A lot of terrible things have been excused by this is how we have to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And but then if you're stupid and you run and you go out of business, and that so there's a fine line, but it requires some self-reflection in saying, is this a reason or an excuse?
Difference between a problem that's going to be inconvenient and an existential crisis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we need to deal with the inconvenience. That's part of moving forward.
Do you mind just kind of giving us your understanding or definition of what exactly organic is?
Oh yeah, so organic is very simple. No synthetic fertilizers or pesticides. So that's what I mean. It's a very simplistic line in the sand that Lodi rules tried to get more nuance but I like that line in the sand. I'm very comfortable with that line in the sand, and I think it has a logic to it. We want to be growing our vineyards with natural materials, and I think where we are in the Napa Valley, our vineyards, we can do that very reliably and cost effectively, and I just get a lot of pride in that we're managing our pests with natural materials. Our fertility is all natural, and so that's something that just means a lot to me as a
that makes a lot of sense. But presumably, because I do just want to make sure we paint the picture for the listener too. Organic, the lack of synthetic additions doesn't mean laissez-faire. So presumably you are adding things.
Yeah, because you asked me organic, and that's just the letter of the law, right? There's all this stuff that goes around it in order to make it happen. But the letter of the law is super clear. It's that one sentence basically. But then how do you pull that off? Because some of the corporate organic, which is I'm still in favor of. Everyone want it to keep building, and people also should be able to get organic food at Walmart. I think that's great. But we call it input substitution. So you switch from a synthetic fertilizer to an organic fertilizer, from a synthetic fungicide to an organic fungicide. So now so that's like the first phase of organic farming. But the idea is to have what we call a systems approach, where you're rethinking your whole farming system and trying to design in ecological balance. Okay, so in other words, rather than spraying an organic insecticide, which has less residual, less non-target problems, much better for the environment than a synthetic pesticide.
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
But you'd rather plant flowering plants around your property that host beneficial insects, so that the insect population stays in balance, so you don't have to spray an insecticide in the first place. And so that's it's a rethinking of your whole farming system so that it's buffered and stable and fertility, same thing. Rather than go to it, like at Matthiason, we don't use organic nitrogen fertilizers. We use our cover crops. And then so we can get our nitrogen from what we plant between the vines, and we plant different stuff on different vineyards so that we get the right amount of nitrogen. So we're not using any nitrogen fertilizer, organic or conventional, because we're doing it with natural soil building processes. And that's great for the vines because it's the ultimate slow release. Because pulses of nitrogen are really detrimental to wine quality. You get that you have harsher tannins, the mouthfeel doesn't come together, and so then you have to do a longer hang time, and that's our high alcohol and heavier wine. And so part of how we make our wine is that we don't have any of these pulses. We have nice, steady, organic nutrient release. So the motto is feed the soil, not the plants. We want to have good, healthy soil, and the plants can get what they want from it nice and slowly. And that's really great for wine quality. It's great for the planet. Less leaching. We're not polluting the groundwater, etc. We're depleting resources to go get our fertilizer, and so that's. But now we're pushing into like more of the regenerative organic concept, which is like another layer on top of organic, which is saving resources, creating habitat, saving water. Paying your
making sure we can be
well.
Organic in the future, kind of thing.
Yeah. And so those are all kind of part of the overall like philosophy of organic, but it's not the letter of the law. So now that organic is spreading, the regenerative organic idea is make sure that philosophy of improving everything is still there, and tighten it down a little bit so that it's kind of agreed upon as a definition.
Okay.
So that's why they have the certification. Like Talbot Creek just got certified. They've been really good leaders at getting the certification process for regenerative organic.
If I'm at home and I'm listening to this and it sounds good, if I'm like, how can I make sure that more of the liquid that is in my glass reaches this standard? What should I look out for? Are there certain certifications or producers or?
Well, wine is tricky on certifications because we have all these weird laws, what you can say on your label. So we don't put anything on our label because we don't certify our winery. There's a couple little sticking points that keep us from certifying our winery. Like for some reason, I've never been able to figure out why. You can't use argon gas, for example. And like inert gas is a really important part of winemaking, that we can use less SO2. So basically, for me, I look at for one thing, I try to drink family-owned wine. So I don't mess around with like big corporate wine for what we drink at our house. Really, because what I love about wine is when you get the point of view, the sense of the people making it. It's not just a terroir thing for me. I really love tasting it and thinking about the point of view. Maybe like there's and getting the sense of the people in the hands.
This is the product of the earth
with a
from
small
that
winery. Place.
Yeah, from this guy.
Yeah, these people that have a different take on it, right? Because everyone has a different take on it. If you're a Burgundy fan, it's always interesting to do two different producers from the same vineyard. The wines are different. Well, if it's all terroir, why are the wines different? They have a different point of view. This guy is gregarious and the wine's fruity, or this guy takes a long time to get to know and the wine's tighter. It's always going to be in there. But subconscious, it's just the way they make this. People make subconscious decisions, and I love that. So you have to be a small winery in order to get that sense of the people. It's hard with a big winery. It's just hard. Big team. It's just different things. So we drink small wineries. So then we basically look at what's their vibe. What are they known for? Like Spottswoode. I mean, Spottswoode has been advocating for organic farming loudly for 40 years. So they don't need to put anything on their label. If you look at their website or just do a little Googling, you can immediately get a sense of where their values are. And so then you feel good about supporting that winery if you're interested in organic farming. If the website only has pictures of luxury cars and bragging about how fancy of an architect they used, maybe that's not where the core of their value system isn't how their grapes are grown.
That's a good point. Spottswoode was into organic before it was cool, too.
Yeah, Frog's Leap. I mean, Sinsky, Chappellet, super OG on organic, and so you can kind of get that vibe if you scratch a little bit.
Yeah. And I'd also think to tell find someone who loves wine, maybe even works in the business, and don't ask them what they're excited to sell. Ask them what they're excited to drink at home.
There you go.
That's a pretty good filtering device too, because we all have to sell the things we have to sell in restaurants sometimes to pay the bills, but those aren't necessarily the things that are on our table at home,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. There is a guy, John Bonet, that I think you're very familiar with. He's got a pretty good palate, and he's got a lot to say about a new style of wine, so definitely recommend him.
John was really great at helping open up the wine industry to make room for all these young winemakers I'm talking about, as that are coming up. It was huge what John did with his book and his platform there for a few years, basically creating a space for more diversity in the wine industry.
Funny enough,
Some of the powers that be weren't that happy about it, but it's okay.
I read his book, and I was introduced to you through that book before I'd ever tried your wine, because I got it when I was just starting my journey of learning about wines when I was like 22-ish. It's like, who is this Steve Matthiasson? Okay, yeah, we'll see. Yeah. So someone listening at home who wants to find out more about what you do, maybe find your wines, where should they go to discover more about you?
Okay. Well, our website, we have a new website that has a whole lot of information in it, because I wrote a bunch of essays on some of the different tenets of regenerative organic. So it'd be interesting for people to look at that and learn about, when we talk about habitat, the nuts and bolts of what we actually do. So that's one place to learn more about us. You can find our wines we tend to be independent retailers. We're in most of the country, about 46 states, in about 25 countries, and so you can generally find our wines.
What are the 4 states that don't have you?
Well, Nebraska, unfortunately.
Really?
Yeah, it just never worked out for some reason.
Okay. So, we've got to fix this up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Nebraska, Alaska, Maine, and New Hampshire.
Okay. Have you ever talked to anyone in Nebraska? Do you have any contacts?
We talked to someone, because Chris Brockway is a friend, and he's from Nebraska. He introduced us to someone like 10 years ago or something like that. I can't remember, but for some reason it didn't work out.
I was guessing it'd probably be Quench would be the distributor that would make most sense. Because I was actually, after this, going to ask if you'd have any interest in ever coming out for a wine dinner. So yeah, we gotta solve that if that's going to happen, aren't we?
Yeah, is it Mahogany also in Oklahoma? Is it the same company?
3 in Oklahoma, 1 in Nebraska.
Yeah, because the Oklahoma Mahogany has always been big Matthiason supporters.
Yeah, I was the Tulsa wine buyer.
Okay, so you remember from that time.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Love Tulsa.
You're distributing... Oh, sorry, you go first. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about wine writers, and I was in Tulsa with Eric Asimov.
Really? That's awesome.
We go to the Bob Dylan Museum, and he just looks at me and he goes, "Just so you know, I'm going to be here for about 6 hours, and I'm not going to do any talking." He's like a giant Bob Dylan fan, and it was so fun. I was just like, God, he is in heaven right now.
That's awesome.
And so, that's such a cool museum. I had the Woody Guthrie Museum right next door. It was so cool. And they had an exhibit on the Pogues there, because it was like the lineage of Woody Guthrie. It was super cool. Love Tulsa.
Very, very Oklahoma. Steve, before we end up talking for the next 15 hours, I do actually have to go and work, sadly enough. So, I really thank you for coming on to the show. Thanks for talking to us for a little while. And I'm dead serious. I want to see if I can't get in touch with Quench, and I think it'd be, honestly, Thirst distributes them in Tulsa, and it's kind of Thirst's counterpart here, so it would make sense. You never know, though. The world of distribution is weird and wild, and has intricacies even I don't know.
It is a crazy, crazy world. Byzantine would be the name for it. It's just hard to understand. But well, thank you for fighting the good fight on beverages. I think that
one glass at a time.
One glass at a time.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening, and stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.